What are you doing? Stop that right now!
The judge asked one question. Does your HOA hold any recorded instrument establishing their legal right to the reservoir level their properties require? Their attorney started explaining implied easements and established use and reasonable reliance. The judge said, yes or no. He said, no, Your Honor. She wrote a note. She said, continue. Here's what led to that courtroom. My father built this dam in 1961, permitted it, engineered the spillway, licensed it through the state. Then he handed me the operating license in 1987 and said, the gauge tells you everything. Read it before you do anything else. I read it every morning for 38 years. In 2005, a developer sold 87 luxury lakefront homes against my reservoir. No call, no easement, no agreement. Just a brochure that said, your lake, your life. I documented it, and I waited. In 2026, I opened the gate. 11 mortgage lenders sent certified letters in 11 days. The judge ordered a recorded agreement. The HOA wired $144,000. The gauge is back at 34 feet. It will stay there. But before we jump into today's story, show some love by hitting like, subscribing to the channel, and telling me where you're watching from. Harlan Dodd had been reading water the way other men read weather. By instinct first, by instrument second, by the accumulated record of both over a lifetime, since he was old enough to walk the dam with his father on Saturday mornings and read the staff gauge at the upstream face. The staff gauge was a graduated steel post set in concrete at the dam's upstream toe in 1962, the year the state issued Dam Operating License, DOL-1961-008, and the year his father had completed the impoundment's first full operating cycle. The gauge was calibrated to mean sea level, the same datum the state's Dam Safety Office used for its inspection records, the same datum Harlan had used in 38 years of professional dam safety work, the same datum the maintenance log used for every reservoir level entry from 1962 forward. At normal operating pool, the gauge read 34 feet. Harlan had read it 10,000 times. He read it every morning he was on the property, in every season, in every year since his father had handed him the operating license in 1987 and said, the gauge tells you everything. Read it before you do anything else. He had read it this morning at 6:40 a.m. It said 34 feet, normal operating pool. The reservoir behind the dam, running at its full 340-acre surface, the water still in the early March light, the two arms of the impoundment extending east and northeast into the basin that Cutter Creek had been filling since his father closed the gates in the autumn of 1961, and watched the water rise for the first time. He had written the reading in the maintenance log at the kitchen table afterward. The same format his father had used, the same hardbound notebook series, the current volume, a replacement of the 19th, and had set the log beside the letter from the State Dam Safety Office that had arrived 3 days ago. He had read the letter 6 times. He had called Clara Venn yesterday. She had said, I'll review the license and the parcel records tonight and call you tomorrow morning. He had said, I'll be at the dam at 6:40. She had said, I'll call at 8. He was waiting for 8. The Dodd family had acquired the 1,100-acre parcel in 1952, Harlan's grandfather's purchase, a cattle and timber property in the county's eastern range, whose defining geographic feature was Cutter Creek, a perennial stream fed by 3 springs in the North Ridge, running south through the property's center, before bending east at the natural basin where the valley floor widened and the creek's gradient flattened to near level for approximately 800 feet before resuming its fall toward the county's main drainage. His grandfather had recognized the basin on his first survey of the property. He had noted it in the purchase file, a handwritten annotation on the property plat, natural impoundment site at Creek Bend, valley floor elevation consistent, embankment feasible. He had not built the dam. He had run cattle, logged the timber on a sustained yield rotation, and passed the property to Harlan's father in 1958, with the annotation still in the purchase file and the creek still running free through the basin. His father had built the dam in 1961. The decision had been practical and carefully timed. The federal government's Rural Water Development Program had made low-interest financing available for private impoundment projects in the early 1960s. The state's dam construction permitting process had been streamlined for agricultural impoundments under 50 feet in height, and his father had spent 3 years before breaking ground, consulting with the County Extension Service's engineering advisor, reviewing the creek's flow records at the State Hydrology Office, and having a civil engineer draw the embankment geometry. The dam that resulted was a 44-foot compacted earthen embankment, a rolled earth fill structure using material excavated from the basin's eastern margin. The embankment keyed into the valley's bedrock at both abutments, the crest running 380 feet across the valley floor, at an elevation that would impound approximately 340 acres of water surface at normal operating pool. The concrete spillway was set into the embankment's north abutment, a Morning Glory inlet design. The overflow elevation set at 34 feet on the staff gauge, the discharge channel running north along the abutment face to the downstream channel below the dam. When the reservoir reached 34 feet, the spillway began passing flow automatically, the overflow protecting the embankment from overtopping in high inflow events. His father had specified the spillway's capacity at twice the estimated 100-year storm inflow, a conservative standard that the state's Dam Safety Office had confirmed as adequate at every subsequent inspection. The 2 sluice gates were set in the embankment's south abutment. Gate A, the primary flow control gate, a 36-inch cast-iron sluice gate operated by hand wheel from the inspection walkway at the embankment's crest, and Gate B, the emergency bypass gate, a 24-inch gate set 3 feet lower in the embankment face, intended for use when the reservoir required rapid drawdown beyond Gate A's capacity. Both gates discharged through concrete-lined conduits to the downstream channel below the dam. Gate A's fully open position discharged approximately 1,400 gallons per minute at normal operating pool, sufficient to draw the reservoir down at approximately 6 inches per day across the 340-acre surface. Both gates, fully open, discharged approximately 4,200 gallons per minute, sufficient to draw the reservoir down at approximately 18 inches per day. His father had completed the dam in October 1961, closed both gates, and watched Cutter Creek begin filling the basin behind the embankment. The reservoir had reached normal operating pool, 34 feet on the staff gauge, in March 1962, after a winter of above-average snowpack and spring runoff. The state had issued Dam Operating License, DOL-1961-008, in April 1962, following the completion inspection by the State Dam Safety Office's field engineer, who had found the embankment, spillway, and gate assemblies in conformance with the permitted design. Harlan had been 13 years old in April 1962. He had been at the dam with his father when the state inspector arrived, had watched the inspection from the embankment crest, had followed the inspector and his father down the inspection walkway to the gate assemblies, and had listened while the inspector explained what the license meant and what the operating conditions required. He had understood most of it at 13. He had understood all of it by the time he finished his civil engineering degree at the State University in 1974, and had spent the following year working for a dam safety consulting firm, whose practice was exclusively the inspection, certification, and remediation of earthen dam infrastructure in the western states. The dam safety work had suited him in a way that other engineering practice had not. It required the specific combination of structural analysis, hydrology, and operational judgment that came naturally to a person who had grown up reading a staff gauge on Saturday mornings, who understood that a dam was not a static structure, but an operating system, whose safety depended on the continuous, informed attention of the person responsible for it. He had spent 38 years as a licensed dam safety inspector, conducting Class B and Class C dam inspections for the state and for private operators, testifying as an expert witness in 11 dam safety proceedings, and writing the operational guidelines for 4 major reservoir systems in the state's western district. He had retired in 2012 at 63, returned to the ranch full-time, and had assumed the dam's operational management with the same systematic rigor he had applied to every professional inspection. The daily gauge readings, the quarterly gate function tests, the annual embankment inspection, the maintenance log entries in the same format his father had used, updated to include the additional parameters the state's current inspection protocol required. Dam Operating License DOL-1961-008 was not simply a permission to operate a dam. It was a legal instrument establishing the licensed operator's sole authority and responsibility over the impoundment structure and its water surface. The license covered the dam's physical components: the embankment, the spillway, the gate assemblies, the inspection access infrastructure, and the reservoir's operating parameters: the normal operating pool elevation, the maximum pool elevation, the minimum pool elevation required for the state's periodic maintenance inspection, and the maintenance drawdown schedule. The licensed operator was the only person with legal authority to adjust the gates. No other person, not a neighboring property owner, not a homeowners association, not a county agency, not a court, could lawfully direct the gate operation without the licensed operator's concurrence and without the State Dam Safety Office's authorization. The license's operating conditions included a mandatory maintenance drawdown requirement. Every 7 years, the licensed operator was required to draw the reservoir down to a minimum inspection pool level, 30 feet on the staff gauge, 4 feet below normal operating pool, to allow the state's inspector to examine the embankment's upstream face, the gate seals, the spillway inlet, and the downstream toe's seepage condition. The inspection could not be conducted at normal operating pool. The drawdown was not optional. It was a condition of the license. The last maintenance drawdown had been in October 2017. The next one was due. The reservoir's hydrology was stable and well documented. Cutter Creek's mean annual flow had been measured at the State Hydrology Office's gauging station since 1948, a 14-year record before the dam's construction, sufficient for the design hydrology, extended to a 78-year record now, available on the State Hydrology Office's public data portal. The creek's mean annual inflow to the reservoir was approximately 8,400 acre-feet per year, with high flow periods in March through May driven by snowpack runoff from the North Ridge, and low flow periods in August through October when the spring's output governed the base flow. At mean annual inflow, the reservoir's evaporative losses were approximately 1,200 acre-feet per year, leaving a net annual surplus of approximately 7,200 acre-feet that discharged through the spillway during high pool periods. The reservoir had never failed to maintain normal operating pool through an extended drought. The three-spring system feeding Cutter Creek had maintained base flow through the 1988 and 2012 drought years that had stressed every other surface water system in the county. The North Ridge's limestone aquifer providing a drought-resistant base flow that the county's Water Resources Office had documented in a 2003 groundwater study. At normal operating pool, the reservoir covered 340 acres of water surface. The maximum depth at the dam face was 38 feet. The reservoir's eastern arm extended approximately 2.1 miles from the dam, narrowing as it ran east and northeast into the basin's upper reach. The eastern arm's far end lay within Harlan's property boundary. The reservoir was contained entirely within the 1,100-acre Dodd parcel. No portion of the water surface extending onto any adjacent property at normal operating pool. This was the fact that the Lakeview Premier Development's lawyers had apparently not verified in 2004, when they had platted 87 lakefront lots against the reservoir's eastern and northeastern shoreline. Lakeview Premier Development had acquired the 620-acre parcel immediately east of Harlan's in 2003, a former ranch property whose western edge ran along the county assessor's boundary line that formed the eastern boundary of the Dodd parcel. The development site plan, filed with the County Planning Department in early 2004 and available in the county's public records, had shown 87 residential lots arranged along the reservoir's eastern and northeastern shoreline, each lot with a private dock easement extending to the water's edge, the lots ranging in size from 0.4 to 1.2 acres, with the lakefront premium reflected in the lot pricing. The community's common area, a 14-acre parcel including the boat launch, the lakeside clubhouse, and the shoreline park, had been graded along the reservoir's eastern margin. The development had been marketed as Lakeview Shores, 87 luxury lakefront homes on a pristine private reservoir, the most exclusive residential community in the county. The site plan had shown the reservoir's shoreline as the lot's western boundary. The site plan had not shown who owned the dam. The site plan had not shown who held the operating license. The site plan had not shown what happened to the shoreline when the licensed operator performed the maintenance drawdown required by the license every 7 years. Harlan had first seen the development site plan in the County Planning Department's public notice, posted in the county paper in February 2004, when the conditional use permit application had been filed. He had driven to the planning department and had reviewed the site plan at the public records counter. He had looked at the lot layout, the dock easements, the common area configuration, and the marketing description. He had noted that the development's entire value proposition, 87 lakefront lots at a premium price, was built against the water surface of his reservoir, controlled by his gates, maintained at its current level by his continued operation of DOL-1961-008, in accordance with the state's requirements. He had not been contacted by Lakeview Premier Development. No instrument had been presented to him for execution. No reservoir use agreement had been proposed. No easement negotiation had been initiated. The developer had treated the reservoir as a natural geographic feature, a lake that existed independently of any human decision or legal authority, rather than as a licensed impoundment whose level was set and maintained by the owner of the dam at the reservoir's western end. He had called Gerald Marsh, the property and water law attorney who had handled the ranch's legal matters since 1979, in March 2004, after the conditional use permit had been approved and the grading crews had arrived on the adjacent parcel. He had described what he had seen in the site plan and had asked Gerald's assessment. Gerald had said, "They've built a development against your reservoir without an agreement with you. The question is what you want to do about it. The development is proceeding. The lots are being sold. If you act now, you can potentially halt the development or require an agreement before the homes are built. If you wait, you have 87 property owners who bought in good faith against a lake they had no reason to believe was legally complicated, and the equities shift." Harlan had said, "What would an agreement look like?" Gerald had said, "A recorded reservoir use agreement, an instrument in the county deed records establishing the development's right to the lake level their lots require, the compensation to you for that right, and the terms governing the maintenance drawdown schedule that the operating license requires. It should have been negotiated before the first lot sold. It wasn't. You can require it now, before the homes are built, at lower cost to both sides. Or you can wait." Harlan had thought about it for 2 weeks. He had walked the dam, read the gauge, looked east across the reservoir's surface toward the grading activity visible on the adjacent parcel's western margin. He had thought about his father standing at this dam in 1961, watching the water rise for the first time, and about what his father had understood about the dam's relationship to everything downstream and adjacent to it. That the water was there because the dam was there, and the dam was there because the Dodd family had built it and licensed it and maintained it. And everything built against the water's presence was built against the Dodd family's continued operational decision to keep the gates closed. He had called Gerald back and had said, "I'm going to document this and wait, not forever, but I want the development complete and the HOA formed before I negotiate, because I want to negotiate with the entity that will hold the agreement in perpetuity, not with a developer who will be gone when the last lot sells." Gerald had said, "Document everything from today forward." Harlan had said, "I always do." He had written the entry in the maintenance log the same evening, March 2004. Lakeview Premier Development grading commenced on adjacent eastern parcel. Site plan shows 87 lakefront lots against reservoir's eastern shoreline. No reservoir use agreement has been presented or negotiated. No contact from developer. Decision: document and defer negotiation until HOA formation. Reservoir: normal pool, 34 feet. Gate A, closed. Gate B, closed. DOL-1961-008, current. The development had been completed in 2005. The 87 homes had been built and sold between 2005 and 2007, the prices ranging from $580,000 to $890,000, the lakefront premium averaging $680,000 per unit. The Lakeview Shores HOA had been formed in 2005 when the first residents took occupancy. Lakeview Premier Development had conveyed the 14-acre common area parcel to the HOA in 2007 when the last lot sold. The conveyance deed describing the common area's amenities, the boat launch, the clubhouse, the shoreline park, without any reference to a reservoir use agreement, without any reference to dam operating license, DOL-1961-008, and without any reference to the maintenance drawdown requirement that would reduce the reservoir by 4 feet every 7 years for as long as the dam existed. Harlan had updated the maintenance log entry in 2007 when the HOA formation was complete. HOA formed and common area conveyed. No reservoir use agreement recorded. No contact from HOA or developer. Decision: maintain current posture. Reservoir: normal pool, 34 feet. DOL-1961-008. Current. Next maintenance drawdown, 2010 per license schedule. He had conducted the 2010 drawdown. Gate A opened, the reservoir drawn down to 30 feet over 20 days, the state inspector's examination completed. Gate A closed, the reservoir refilled over 6 weeks, without notifying the HOA, because the license's notification requirements in 2010 had not included adjacent non-licensee parties. He had watched the HOA's dock structures sit above the waterline for 20 days, and had noted in the maintenance log that no contact had come from the HOA during the drawdown period. Either they had not noticed, or they had noticed and had not known what to ask. The 2017 drawdown had been different. He had given the HOA informal advance notice, a letter to the HOA's management company, not a legal notice, a neighborly communication, 2 weeks before Gate A opened, describing the maintenance drawdown and its expected duration. The HOA's management company had acknowledged receipt and had forwarded the letter to the board. The board had sent him a letter asking whether the drawdown could be shortened. He had written back, "The state's inspection protocol requires a minimum of 5 days at the 30-foot level. The drawdown takes 20 days to reach 30 feet. I cannot shorten it." The board had not responded further. The drawdown had proceeded. The reservoir had refilled. No legal action had followed. No agreement had been proposed. He had noted this in the maintenance log. 2017 drawdown complete. HOA notified informally. Board requested shortened drawdown. Declined. License requirements non-negotiable. No legal action. No agreement proposed. Reservoir, normal pool, 34 feet. DOL-1961-008. Renewed 2012. Current. Next maintenance drawdown, 2024 per license schedule. He had underlined 2024 and had added a margin note. Negotiate agreement before 2024 drawdown. He had not negotiated before the 2024 drawdown. Gerald Marsh had retired in 2017, and Harlan had not yet retained new counsel, and the years had moved the way years moved on a working ranch. The daily gauge readings, the quarterly gate tests, the annual embankment inspections, the maintenance log filling its pages. And 2024 had arrived, and the State Dam Safety Office had sent the drawdown scheduling notice, and Harlan had looked at the margin note from 2017 and had called Clara Venn, whose name Gerald had given him before retiring, as the one attorney in the region he trusted with a dam operating license dispute. The state's letter had arrived on a Tuesday in March 2026. It was a standard scheduling notice from the Dam Safety Office's Inspection Division. Dam Operating License, DOL-1961-008, Dam. Scheduled maintenance drawdown and inspection. The notice requesting the licensed operator's confirmation of the proposed inspection window. A 30-day period beginning in May 2026, and reminding the licensed operator of the notification requirements applicable to the current license renewal, which Harlan had renewed in 2012 under the updated state dam safety regulations that now required the licensed operator to provide written notice to adjacent property owners at least 30 days before initiating a maintenance drawdown. He had read the notification requirement twice. He had not notified the HOA 30 days before the 2017 drawdown. He had notified them 14 days before, informally, before the 2012 renewal's updated requirements had been fully applicable to his license cycle. The 2026 drawdown would require 30 days formal written notice to the HOA. 30 days formal written notice to 87 lakefront property owners HOA, from the man who controlled the gates, that the reservoir they had built their homes and their property values and their lakefront lives against was going to drop 4 feet. He had called Clara on a Wednesday morning. She had said, "Send me the license, the maintenance log from 2004 forward, the 2017 HOA correspondence, and the state's scheduling notice. I'll review everything tonight and call you at 8 tomorrow." He had said, "I'll be at the dam at 6:40. She had said, "Read the gauge. I'll call at 8. He had gone to the dam at 6:40 this morning, the March light coming up pale and cold over the North Ridge, the 2 tributary streams audible in the upstream basin, Cutter Creek running at its early spring volume, the reservoir surface still and dark at 34 feet on the staff gauge. He had read the gauge, written it in the maintenance log, and had stood on the inspection walkway for a long moment, looking east, across the 340-acre surface toward the Lakeview Shores development's western margin, visible at the reservoir's far end. The dock structures, the shoreline park's tree line, the roof lines of the nearest lakefront homes set back from the water behind their sloped lots. 87 households, $680,000 average. 21 years of lake living built against water that existed because his father had closed 2 gates in the autumn of 1961, and because Harlan had kept them closed ever since. He had gone back to the house and had made coffee, and had opened the maintenance log to the current page, and had looked at the margin note from 2017. Negotiate agreement before 2024 drawdown. He had not negotiated before the 2024 drawdown. He was going to negotiate before the 2026 drawdown, or, if the HOA's response required it, he was going to open Gate A on the state's schedule regardless. The 30 days formal written notice in the mail, the drawdown proceeding as the license required, the reservoir finding its 30-foot inspection level at 6 inches per day, and whatever the HOA's 87 lakefront households discovered about their property values and their mortgage documentation and their dock access, when the water line dropped 4 feet, being the consequence of 21 years of building a community against a dam whose owner had never been asked. The phone rang at 8 o'clock. He picked it up. Clara said, "I've read the license. I've read the maintenance log. I've pulled the parcel records and the HOA's formation documents. Harlan, this is a clean case, and it is a significant one. Are you ready to hear what the license says?" He said, "I've been ready since 2004. She said, "Then here's where we start." The developer's marketing materials had called it the lake, not Dodd Reservoir, not Cutter Creek Impoundment, not the privately licensed water body on the adjacent parcel, whose operating level was controlled by a man named Harlan Dodd, under a state dam operating license issued in 1962. The Lakeview Premier Development marketing materials, the full-color brochure distributed at the county's new Home Expo in the spring of 2004, the website that had gone live the same month, the billboard on the county highway showing an aerial photograph of the reservoir's eastern arm with the tagline, "Your lake, your life, Lakeview Shores," had called it the lake with the possessive confidence of a developer who had decided that the water's presence was a geographic fact, rather than an operational decision made by a neighbor with a handwheel and a license. The brochure had described Lakeview Shores as 87 luxury lakefront residences on a pristine private reservoir, the most exclusive residential address in the county. The amenity list had been precise: private dock easement with every lot, community boat launch at the common area's southern end, lakeside clubhouse with a 3,400 square foot waterfront deck, shoreline park with walking trail along the eastern and northeastern margins of the lake's shoreline. The aerial photograph on the brochure's cover had been taken at normal operating pool, 34 feet on the staff gauge, the reservoir's 340-acre surface running full to its natural margins, the water blue and still. The eastern shoreline, where the 87 lots would be graded, showing the pale grass and the oak canopy of the undeveloped parcel. Harlan had kept the brochure. He had found it at the County Home Expo. He had not been invited to the expo, had gone as a member of the public, had taken a brochure from the developer's display table, had looked at the aerial photograph, and had identified his dam in the lower left corner of the image, the earthen embankment visible as a tan linear feature crossing the valley floor at the reservoir's western end. The developer's display staff had not known what the tan linear feature was. He had not told them. He had taken the brochure home, and had filed it in the Water Systems Records folder, beside the maintenance log, behind the tab labeled Lakeview Premier Development, 2004 onward. The construction had taken 18 months. The grading crews had worked the eastern and northeastern shoreline from June 2004 through the autumn, terracing the 87 lots against the reservoir's contour, the excavated material forming the lot pads, and the internal road subgrade. The dock structures had been installed in the spring of 2005, 87 private dock assemblies, each one extending from its lot's shoreline edge to a finger pier at the waterline. The dock platforms sitting at the elevation appropriate to a reservoir running at 34 feet on the staff gauge. The boat launch had been poured at the common area's southern end, a concrete ramp running from the parking area to the waterline. The ramp's toe set at the reservoir's normal pool elevation. The clubhouse had been constructed on the common area's northeastern corner, the waterfront deck cantilevered over the shoreline bank, the deck's elevation calculated against the reservoir at normal operating pool. None of the dock structures, the boat launch, or the clubhouse deck had been designed with a 4-foot drawdown tolerance. Harlan had noted this from his inspection walkway during the 2010 maintenance drawdown. The dock platforms sitting above the waterline on their exposed pilings, the boat launch ramp extending into a mudflat where the waterline had been, the clubhouse deck's cantilever overlooking a receded shoreline rather than the water surface it had been designed to meet. He had photographed the conditions from the inspection walkway with his field camera, the images dated and filed. He had done the same in 2017. Both sets of photographs were in the water systems file. The first residents had taken occupancy in the summer of 2005. The sales prices for the 87 units had ranged from $578,000 for the smallest interior lot to $892,000 for the largest corner lot on the reservoir's northeastern arm. The premium gradient running from the lot's water frontage, dock length, and view angle. The county assessor's office had established the development's assessed values at a blended rate that reflected the lakefront premium. The assessor's notes in the public record citing private lakefront access and dock infrastructure as the primary value driver for the Lakeview Shores parcels. The 87 households had financed their purchases through 11 different mortgage lenders, the loan values averaging $544,000 per unit, each loan underwritten against an appraised value that included the lakefront premium, each appraisal based on the reservoir at normal operating pool. None of the appraisals noting the existence of Dam Operating License, DOL-1961-008, or the maintenance drawdown requirement that reduced the reservoir by 4 feet every 7 years. The HOA had formed in October 2005, when the development reached its minimum owner occupancy threshold for association formation. Its governing documents, the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, the bylaws, and the rules and regulations, had been drafted by Lakeview Premier Development's HOA formation attorney and recorded in the county deed records. The CC and Rs had described the common area's amenities, including the lakeside clubhouse, boat launch, and waterfront park, as permanent community infrastructure. The CC and Rs had not mentioned dam. The CC and Rs had not mentioned Dam Operating License, DOL-1961-008. The CC and Rs had not mentioned the maintenance drawdown requirement. The development attorney had recorded a community property document describing a lake that did not legally belong to the community and a water level that the community had no right to rely on, and had filed it in the county deed records where it had been sitting for 21 years, telling Lakeview Shores residents something that was not supported by a single recorded legal instrument. Harlan had obtained a copy of the CC and Rs from the county deed records in 2005 and had filed it behind the Lakeview Premier Development tab. He had read the amenity descriptions and had written a note in the margin of the maintenance log's 2005 entry. CC and Rs recorded. Reservoir described as community amenity. No reservoir use agreement referenced. No contact from HOA. 21 years of maintenance log entries had followed in the same pattern. He read the gauge every morning. He logged the reading. He noted the gate positions. Gate A closed, Gate B closed, reservoir at normal operating pool, DOL-1961-008, current. And he noted, at the end of each annual summary entry, the same 4 words: no reservoir use agreement, The entries ran from 2005 through 2025, each year's summary closing with those four words: the absence of an agreement, a continuous documented fact running parallel to the HOA's continuous undocumented use of his reservoir as their community's defining amenity. Sandra Price had been elected HOA president in 2021, the third president in the HOA's history, following 2 terms of the development's original board structure. She had been a Lakeview Shores resident since 2008, a former marketing executive whose professional instincts had transferred cleanly to HOA leadership. She understood brand, she understood community identity, and she understood that Lakeview Shores' identity was entirely built on the lake. Her first community newsletter as president had opened with a sentence that Harlan had read when a copy had appeared in his mailbox. She had mailed the newsletter to all adjacent property owners as part of a community outreach initiative. Lakeview Shores is not just a neighborhood. It is a lakefront community, and that lake is the heart of everything we are. She had appeared in a feature in the county's regional lifestyle magazine in 2022, Lakeview Shores, the county's premier lakefront address, in which she had described the community's amenities, its property values, its quality of life, and its lake with the fluent confidence of a person who had never considered the possibility that the lake's existence required anything other than geography. The magazine had run an aerial photograph of the reservoir, the same eastern arm that the 2004 developer's brochure had used, taken from a similar angle, the water at normal operating pool, the 87 dock structures visible along the eastern and northeastern shoreline, the dam's embankment visible at the western end. The caption had read, "Lakeview Shores sits on a pristine private reservoir, one of the county's most coveted residential settings." She had appeared in a second feature in 2024, a local news segment on community-led environmental stewardship, in which the HOA's shoreline restoration planting project had been profiled. Sandra had been interviewed on the clubhouse deck, the reservoir visible behind her, and had said, "We take our responsibility to this lake very seriously. The water, the shoreline, the ecology, these are community assets and we treat them that way." The segment had aired on the regional news channel and had been shared to the HOA's community forum, where it had generated 140 responses and had been viewed 8,000 times. Harlan had watched the segment on his laptop at the kitchen table. He had noted the clubhouse deck behind Sandra, the reservoir at 34 feet in the background, the dock structures visible on the lots to the north of the clubhouse. He had closed the laptop and had opened the maintenance log and had written, "Community Assets, DOL-1961-008, current. Gate A, closed. Gate B, closed. No reservoir use agreement. Next maintenance drawdown, overdue per 2024 schedule." The state scheduling notice had arrived in March 2026. He had read it at the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning. The Dam Safety Office's standard inspection scheduling form, the licensed operator's name and license number in the header, the proposed inspection window in May 2026, the reminder of the 30-day advance notification requirement for adjacent property owners under the 2012 license renewal's updated conditions. He had read the notification requirement twice. 30 days written notice to adjacent property owners. The HOA's common area parcel shared his eastern boundary for approximately 1.4 miles of shoreline. The HOA was an adjacent property owner. 30 days written notice, before Gate A opened, that the reservoir was going to drop 4 feet. He had called Clara Venn on Wednesday. She had reviewed the file overnight, the license, the maintenance log from 2004 forward, the 2017 HOA correspondence, the state scheduling notice, the CC and RS, the county assessor's value records, and had called at 8 the next morning. She had said, 21 years of undocumented reservoir use, 87 households whose property values, mortgage appraisals, and dock infrastructure all depend on a lake level controlled by your gates. A maintenance drawdown scheduled by the state that will expose the legal gap to every mortgage lender holding paper on those 87 properties. And a dam operating license that gives you sole authority over the gates and a legal obligation to perform the drawdown, regardless of what the HOA wants. He had said, "That's what I have." She had said, "The demand letter goes out before the 30-day notification. I want the HOA to receive the demand, understand the legal position, and have the opportunity to respond before the notification clock starts. The sequence matters. demand first, then notification, then drawdown if the demand is rejected. It establishes that you offered a negotiated resolution before exercising your licensed rights. He had said, "How long do they have to respond to the demand?" She had said, 30 days. If they reject it or don't respond, you send the formal 30-day drawdown notification the same day. Gate A opens 60 days from the demand letter's delivery. He had said, "Write the letter." Clara's demand letter had gone out the following Monday, 12 pages, certified mail to the HOA's registered agent and email to the HOA's management company. The letter's structure covered the license, the maintenance logs, 21-year documentation of unauthorized use, and the legal consequence. The HOA held no recorded instrument establishing any right to the reservoir level their community required. The demand had two components. First, a recorded reservoir use agreement negotiated at fair compensation, reflecting 21 years of unauthorized beneficial use and the ongoing right being conveyed. Second, a maintenance cost share agreement covering the dam's ongoing inspection and upkeep requirements, including the mandatory 7-year drawdown schedule, so that the HOA's properties could plan around the drawdown rather than being surprised by it. Response deadline, 30 days. Consequence of rejection. Formal 30-day drawdown notification issued the same day. Gate A opened on the state's inspection schedule. The reservoir drawn to 30 feet at 6 inches per day. The maintenance inspection conducted, and the reservoir use enforcement action filed simultaneously in County District Court. Clara had added one paragraph near the letter's close that she had read to Harlan before sending. The maintenance drawdown required by DOL-1961-008 will reduce the reservoir's surface elevation by 4 feet from its normal operating pool. At that level, 34 of the 87 Lakeview Shores lakefront lots will lose navigable dock access, their shoreline margins exposing mudflat conditions extending between 40 and 90 feet from the current water line. This condition will persist for approximately 25 days during the inspection period. Mortgage lenders holding loans on affected properties may consider this material information. The licensed operator takes no position on lender notification obligations, but notes that the existence of a recorded reservoir use agreement, including the drawdown schedule and its effects, would constitute material disclosure available to lenders, appraisers, and title companies at each affected parcel. Harlan had read that paragraph 3 times. He had said, "You put the mortgage lenders in the letter." Clara had said, "They're already in the situation. I put them in the letter so that the HOA's board understands that the drawdown's consequences extend beyond the water line." A board president who is thinking about 87 households thinks differently than a board president who is thinking about 87 mortgage lenders. He had said, "Send it." She had sent it. He had gone to the dam that afternoon and had read the gauge. 34 feet, normal operating pool. Gate A closed, Gate B closed. He had written the maintenance log entry for the day, the demand letter's delivery, Clara's name, the response deadline, the drawdown notification sequence, and had closed the log. He had stood on the inspection walkway for a moment, the reservoir running east in the afternoon light, the Lakeview Shores dock structures visible at the far end of the eastern arm, the 87 households living their lakefront lives against his water, and had looked at Gate A's handwheel beside him on the walkway, the cast-iron wheel, the same assembly his father had installed in 1961, the mechanism that had set the reservoir's level for 65 years, 30 days for the HOA to respond, then the notification, then 60 days total to Gate A. The water had been at 34 feet since his father closed the gates in 1961. It would stay at 34 feet until Harlan decided otherwise. Clara had pulled the full license chain on a Wednesday night. She had the State Dam Safety Office's public records portal open on her office computer, the license index search running on DOL-1961-008, the results showing the complete filing history. The original 1962 issuance, the 1972 5-year inspection confirmation, the 1987 operator transfer from Harlan's father to Harlan, the 1997 renewal, the 2012 renewal under the updated state dam safety regulations, and the current inspection scheduling notice issued March 2026. She had pulled each document in the chain and had read them in sequence, building the license's legal architecture from its 1962 foundation to its current operating conditions the way she built every case, from the instrument forward, not from the conclusion back. The 1962 issuance document was 11 pages in the state's original format, dense regulatory language covering the dam's physical specifications, the reservoir's operating parameters, the spillway's design capacity, and the gate assembly's operational requirements. The licensed operator section had been straightforward. The operating license for Dodd Dam, license number DOL-1961-008, is issued to Harold R. Dodd as the licensed operator of record. The licensed operator holds sole authority and responsibility for all gate operations, water level management, and maintenance activities associated with the dam structure and its impoundment. No person other than the licensed operator, or the licensed operator's authorized designee, may adjust the gate assemblies or alter the reservoir's operating level without the licensed operator's written authorization and without prior notification to the State Dam Safety Office. The 1987 operator transfer, the document recording Harlan's assumption of the license from his father, had restated the sole authority provision in full and had added Harlan's engineering credentials to the license record: his civil engineering degree, his professional engineer's license number, his dam safety inspection certification. The transfer document had noted that the new licensed operator's professional qualifications exceeded the minimum requirements for a Class B impoundment license, the state's classification for a reservoir of Dodd Reservoir's surface area and maximum depth. The 2012 renewal had been the most consequential document in the chain. The state's updated dam safety regulations, effective 2010 and fully applicable to license renewals from 2011 forward, had added 3 new operating conditions to Class B impoundment licenses. The first new condition required the licensed operator to maintain a current emergency action plan, a document specifying the downstream notification procedures and evacuation protocols in the event of dam distress or uncontrolled release. Harlan had filed the emergency action plan with the renewal application, updated it in 2018, and kept it current. The second new condition required the licensed operator to carry a minimum liability insurance coverage amount, indexed to the downstream population exposure. Harlan had carried the required coverage since 2012. The third new condition, the one Clara had flagged with a colored tab in her printed copy, required the licensed operator to provide written notice to all adjacent property owners at least 30 days before initiating a maintenance drawdown. The notice to include the drawdown's anticipated start date, duration, expected pool reduction, and the basis for the drawdown in the license's maintenance requirements. The 30-day adjacent property owner notification had not been a requirement under the 1997 renewal's conditions. Harlan had conducted the 2010 drawdown without it, which had been technically compliant with the then current license conditions. The 2017 drawdown had occurred under the 2012 renewal's conditions. The 30-day notification had been required. Harlan had provided 14 days informal notice, a technical non-compliance that the State Dam Safety Office had noted in the 2017 inspection report's administrative findings, without issuing a citation, the office's standard practice for first-instance minor procedural deficiencies. The 2026 drawdown would be conducted under the 2012 renewal's full compliance requirements. 30 days, written notice, adjacent property owners. The HOA was the primary adjacent property owner on the reservoir's eastern and northeastern shoreline. Clara had set the license chain documents in sequence on her conference table and had written her findings summary in the same format she used for every case's preliminary analysis: the legal instrument, its operative provisions, its gaps, and its exposure. The instrument: Dam Operating License, DOL-1961-008, issued 1962, renewed 1997 and 2012, held by Harlan G. Dodd as sole licensed operator. The operative provisions: sole operator authority over gate operations, maintenance drawdown requirement every 7 years to a minimum pool elevation of 30 feet at the staff gauge, 30-day adjacent property owner notification before drawdown initiation, Class B impoundment classification. Spillway overflow elevation at 34 feet, normal operating pool. The gaps. No reservoir use agreement recorded in the county deed records between Harlan Dodd and the Lakeview Shores HOA or any predecessor. No easement recorded on Harlan's parcel, granting the HOA or any predecessor any right to the reservoir's water surface, its level, or its navigability. No water right held by the HOA. No instrument of any kind establishing a legal basis for the HOA's 87 lakefront properties' dependence on the reservoir at normal operating pool. The exposure, 87 residential properties whose appraised values, mortgage underwriting, dock infrastructure, and community amenity access were entirely dependent on a reservoir level controlled by a single licensed operator who held no legal obligation to maintain it at any particular elevation, except the dam safety requirements of the license itself. She had called Harlan at 8 the next morning and had read him the findings summary. He had said, "That's what I told Gerald in 2004. She had said, "Gerald was right. The demand letter goes out Monday. I want 30 days for their response, and I want the response in writing, regardless of which direction they go." The demand letter had gone out Monday. Harlan had known from the moment Clara had described its contents, the mortgage lender paragraph in particular, that the HOA's first response would not be to the legal substance. The first response would be to the threat, and the threat would produce a reaction before it produced a legal analysis. He had been right. Sandra had called the HOA's attorney, a property and litigation lawyer named Mitchell Crane, whose firm handled HOA matters for 6 associations in the county, the same day the demand letter was delivered. Harlan knew the timeline because Clara had received Crane's acknowledgement call within 48 hours of the letter's delivery, which was faster than any attorney conducted title research, and meant that Sandra had called Crane before she had read the letter carefully, and Crane had called Clara before he had read the license. Crane's formal response had arrived on day 19 of the 30-day window, a 10-page letter on his firm's letterhead, addressed to Clara, copied to Sandra Price as HOA president. The letter's argument ran in 3 parts. First, Dodd Reservoir was a natural geographic feature of the region, whose water surface had been present and continuous for over 60 years, and the Lakeview Shores community had purchased and developed their properties in reasonable reliance on that water surface's continuity, establishing an implied easement and established use right that was enforceable against any unilateral action by the adjacent property owner. Second, the maintenance drawdown proposed by the licensed operator, if executed with the intention of pressuring the HOA into a financial settlement, would constitute intentional interference with the property rights of 87 good faith purchasers, and would expose Harlan Dodd to significant civil liability. Third, the dam operating license, while acknowledging the licensed operator's technical authority over gate operations, did not extinguish the downstream and adjacent property owners' common law rights to the water surface they had relied upon, and the HOA reserved all rights to seek injunctive relief if the drawdown proceeded. Clara had called Harlan after reading the letter. She had said, 3 arguments. The implied easement and established use argument fails, for the same reason it always fails. Implied easements require an apparent and continuous use that the servient estate owner knew about and acquiesced in, but acquiescence is not ratification when the servient owner has documented his reservation of rights, which your maintenance log does continuously from 2004. The intentional interference argument fails because the drawdown is legally required by the license. Performing a mandatory licensed obligation is not tortious interference, regardless of its timing relative to a legal dispute. The common law rights argument fails because this state's dam safety statute expressly preempts common law water surface rights with respect to licensed impoundments. The license governs, and the license gives you sole authority. Harlan had said, they're going to reject the demand. Clara had said, yes. The letter is their rejection, framed as a response. Crane knows the arguments are weak. The intentional interference framing is a negotiating threat, not a legal theory he intends to take to court. But Sandra has told him to fight, and he's fighting in the only direction available to him. The board meeting had been on a Tuesday evening. The HOA's 5 board members, Crane present by phone, Sandra presiding. The meeting had been noticed to all 87 unit owners, an emergency board meeting, the agenda item listed as Reservoir Use Legal Matter. 41 of the 87 owners had attended in person, filling the clubhouse's meeting room. Sandra had presented the demand letter's claims, had described Harlan's legal position as an aggressive attempt by a neighboring property owner to extract money from a community that had built its homes in good faith, and had recommended that the board vote to reject the demand and authorize Crane to prepare for litigation if the drawdown proceeded. The vote had been 4-1 to reject. The dissenting vote had not been identified in the meeting's posted summary. The community meeting had followed the board meeting by 4 days, a separately noticed gathering, open to all 87 households, held on the clubhouse's waterfront deck in the April evening with the reservoir at 34 feet behind Sandra as she spoke. Harlan had not been invited. He had read the meeting summary in the county paper's community section the following week. A reporter had attended and had filed a brief account under the headline, "Lakeview Shores, HOA fights to protect community lake from neighbor's legal threat." The summary had quoted Sandra, "This lake is not a bargaining chip. It is our community's heart, and we will defend it." It had quoted a resident named Patricia Webb. "We bought here because of this lake. We paid for this lake. Nobody has the right to take it from us." It had described the community's mood as united and determined. Harlan had read the article at the kitchen table with his coffee. He had read the sentence about the lake being the community's heart. He had read the sentence about paying for the lake. He had set the paper down and had looked at the maintenance log on the desk beside it. The current volume, the 2004 entry with its margin annotation, the 21 years of entries that followed it, each year's summary closing with "No reservoir use agreement," and had picked up his phone and called Clara. He had said, "They held a community meeting. The county paper covered it. Sandra told 87 households the lake is their community's heart, and they're going to defend it." Clara had said, "I saw the article." He had said, "File the action." She had said, "I'm filing tomorrow morning. Reservoir use enforcement and declaratory judgment, County District Court." And Harlan, the drawdown notification. "You need to send the formal 30-day notice to the HOA under the 2012 renewals conditions. If you send it the same day I file, the sequence is demand rejected, action filed, notification issued, in that order." Harlan had said, "I'll draft the notification tonight." Clara had said, "Send it certified mail to the HOA's registered agent and to each of the 87 unit owners individually." The 2012 renewals conditions specify adjacent property owners. Each lot is a separate adjacent parcel. 87 certified letters. Harlan had been quiet for a moment. He had said, 87 certified letters. Clara had said, 87 certified letters, each one telling the owner of a lakefront property that their reservoir is going down 4 feet in 30 days, by order of the State Dam Safety Office, under a license the HOA has never seen. He had said, "I'll need envelopes." She had said, "I'll have my office prepare the mailing list from the county assessor's records. You sign the letters. We send them the day I file." He had gone to the State Dam Safety Office's online portal that evening and had submitted the drawdown readiness confirmation, the form that notified the office that the licensed operator was prepared to proceed with the scheduled maintenance drawdown within the proposed May window, and that the 30-day adjacent property owner notifications would be issued concurrent with the filing date. The portal had generated a confirmation number. He had printed it and filed it behind the license tab. He had written the notification letter, a single page, the format the 2012 renewals conditions specified, the licensed operator's name and license number, the dam's designation, the drawdown's anticipated start date, the expected pool reduction of 4 feet over approximately 20 days, the inspection period of 5 days at the 30-foot level, the anticipated refill period of 4 to 6 weeks, and the basis for the drawdown in the license's mandatory maintenance schedule. He had written it once, cleanly, without elaboration or apology, the way a licensed operator described a scheduled maintenance operation that had been required every 7 years since 1961. Clara had filed the action the next morning at 9 a.m. He had driven to the post office at 9:30 with 87 certified mail envelopes, his signature on each letter, Clara's office mailing labels on each envelope, the green return receipt cards attached, the postage metered. The post office clerk had looked at the stack of envelopes and had said, "All going to the same neighborhood?" He had said, "Yes." She had processed them without further comment. He had driven back to the ranch and had gone to the dam and had stood on the inspection walkway with his hand on Gate A's handwheel. The reservoir was at 34 feet. The eastern arm ran toward the Lakeview Shores dock structures in the morning light. The 87 docks visible at the far end, the water still and blue, the shoreline intact at normal operating pool. 30 days from today, the notification period expired. 30 days from today, Gate A opened. He looked at the handwheel under his hand, the same cast iron wheel his father had turned in 1961, the same mechanism that had held the reservoir at 34 feet for 65 years. He released it and walked back to his truck. The state had the confirmation. Clara had the filing. The HOA had the notification. The drawdown was scheduled. The state's confirmation had arrived on a Thursday morning. It was a single-page document from the Dam Safety Office's Inspection Scheduling Division. The confirmation number matching the portal submission Harlan had filed the night before Clara's action. The proposed May inspection window confirmed. The licensed operator's compliance with the 30-day notification requirement acknowledged, and the assigned state inspector's name at the bottom, James Witt, Senior Dam Safety Inspector, Western District. Harlan had met Witt twice, once at a professional dam safety conference in 2009, and once during the 2017 inspection, when Witt had conducted the upstream face examination during the drawdown's 5-day inspection window. Witt was thorough, methodical, and had the specific patience of a state inspector who had seen every variety of licensed operator, the competent and the negligent, the meticulous and the careless, and who reserved his professional respect for the ones whose maintenance logs matched their site conditions. After the 2017 inspection, Witt had written in his inspection report, "Licensed operators' maintenance records are exceptional. Log entries are consistent with observed site conditions at every measured parameter. Embankment, spillway, and gate assemblies in good condition." Harlan had filed the confirmation in the license folder and had called Clara. She had said, "Witt is the assigned inspector." He had said, "Good, he knows the site. He did the 2017 inspection." She had said, "The HOA's certified letters went out yesterday. 87 letters, 87 return receipt cards. We'll start getting the green cards back within the week. The 30-day clock starts on the delivery date for each letter. We'll use the earliest confirmed delivery as the operative start date for the notification period." He had said, "And the court action." She had said, "Filed and served. Crane acknowledged service yesterday afternoon. He has 20 days to respond." He had said, "Has Sandra said anything publicly yet?" Clara had said, "Nothing I've seen, but 87 certified letters about a 4-foot drawdown hit 87 households this week. Give her 48 hours. She had been right about 48 hours. The HOA's community forum had moved fast, faster than certified mail, which was the nature of a residential community where neighbors spoke to each other before the green return receipt cards arrived back at Harlan's mailbox. The first forum post had appeared the evening of the letter's delivery day, from a resident named Thomas Adler, Unit 34, whose lakefront lot sat on the reservoir's northeastern arm. "Did anyone else receive a certified letter today from a Harlan Dodd about a dam drawdown? Says the lake is going down 4 feet in 30 days for a maintenance inspection. Can someone explain what this means for our docks?" The thread had generated 90 replies in the first 12 hours. Sandra had posted at 11 p.m. "The board is aware of the letter and is convening an emergency meeting tomorrow evening. We want to assure all residents that the board is taking this matter with the utmost seriousness and is working with legal counsel to protect the community's interests. More information following the emergency meeting." The emergency board meeting had been on a Friday evening. All 5 board members present, Crane on the phone, 12 residents in attendance at the clubhouse. Sandra had presented the letter's contents and had described the board's legal response, the demand rejection, the pending litigation, Crane's assessment that the drawdown could be challenged. She had also presented, for the first time, the information that Crane had assembled in the 24 hours since the letters went out. The dam operating license, its provisions, the maintenance drawdown requirement, and the sole operator authority clause that Crane had characterized in the meeting, according to the summary posted to the forum afterward, as a technical regulatory framework that does not override the community's established property rights. The mortgage lender question had come from the floor. A resident named Kevin Marsh, Unit 61, whose lot was in the 34 parcel group that would lose navigable dock access at the 4-foot drawdown level. Marsh had said, "My mortgage lender requires me to notify them of material changes to the property's access or amenity status. Is a 4-foot drawdown a material change?" Crane had said, on the phone, "That depends on your specific loan documents and your lender's definition of material change. I'd recommend reviewing your loan covenants before contacting the lender." Marsh had contacted his lender the next morning. He had not been the only one. Clara had called Harlan on Monday with the information her title research contact had surfaced through the county's deed records and the mortgage recording index. In the 5 business days since the certified letters had been delivered, 7 of the 87 unit owners had contacted their mortgage lenders asking questions about the drawdown and its implications for their property's appraised value and amenity access. Of those 7, 3 lenders had responded with written requests for documentation of the reservoir use agreement, the instrument establishing the legal basis for the lakefront premium that had been incorporated into the original appraisal and the loan underwriting. 2 of those 3 lenders, upon receiving the HOA's response that no such agreement existed, had placed the affected loans in technical review, pending assessment of the disclosed material risk. The technical review designation was not a default notice, not a foreclosure proceeding, not a lender action of any immediate consequence. It was an administrative flag, indicating that the loan file contained an unresolved question requiring evaluation. But it was a flag, and it was in 2 loan files, and it had been in those files for less than a week. Harlan had listened to Clara describe the lender responses and had said nothing for a moment. Then, "How many of the 87 lots are in the drawdown exposure zone?" Clara had said, 34 lots lose navigable dock access at the 4-foot drawdown level. Those are the lots in the reservoir's northeastern arm, where the gradient is shallow. The bottom contour runs out gradually, and the waterline retreats significantly with a 4-foot reduction. The remaining 53 lots retain navigable access at the 30-foot pool level, though their dock structures will show exposed pilings. The 34 northeastern lots are the ones whose lenders are going to have the most significant appraisal questions. Harlan had said, "Marsh is in the 34. Clara had said, "Unit 61 is in the northeastern arm." Yes. He had said, "He moved fast." She had said, "He read the letter carefully. The letter specified which lots would lose navigable dock access. He knew which group he was in before he called his lender." His phone had rung on a Tuesday afternoon, a number he did not recognize, a 555 area code from the county seat. He had answered. Sandra Price's voice had the controlled quality he had heard in Diane Hollis's call 14 months earlier, the management of an emotion while speaking, the specific register of a person who had built something and was watching forces assemble against it. She had said, "Mr. Dodd, this is Sandra Price, president of the Lakeview Shores HOA. I think you know why I'm calling." He had said, "I do." She had said, "I want to speak to you directly, neighbor to neighbor, before this goes further. What you're doing to this community, the letters, the lawsuit, the drawdown notice, you're threatening the homes and the property values and the financial security of 87 families who bought here in good faith. They had nothing to do with whatever happened between your family and the developer in 2004. They bought a lakefront home. They built their lives here. You are using a legal technicality to hold their lake hostage." Harlan had let her finish. Then he had said, "Ms. Price, I'm following the State Dam Safety Office's maintenance schedule. The drawdown has been required every 7 years under Dam Operating License DOL-1961-008 since 1962. The last maintenance inspection was in 2017. This one is overdue. I notified the HOA 30 days in advance as required by the 2012 license renewal's operating conditions. The notification is legally required. The drawdown is legally required. I am doing what the license requires me to do." She had said, "You filed a lawsuit the same day you sent those letters." He had said, "I filed a reservoir use enforcement action because your board voted to reject a demand letter asking for a recorded reservoir use agreement, the legal instrument that should have been negotiated in 2004 before the first lot was sold. The drawdown and the lawsuit are separate matters with separate legal bases. The drawdown proceeds on the state's schedule, regardless of the lawsuit's outcome. She had said, "If you open those gates, you will destroy this community. Mortgage lenders are already flagging loans. Property values will drop. People will lose equity they've spent 20 years building. You will do irreversible harm to 87 families who never wronged you." He had said, "Ms. Price, the drawdown has been scheduled since the last inspection in 2017. The 7-year cycle is in the license. Every maintenance log entry from 2017 forward notes the next drawdown as due in 2024. The drawdown is not a response to your community's existence or your board's legal position. It is a maintenance requirement that would be occurring regardless of whether the demand letter had been sent or the lawsuit had been filed. The gates open in 30 days. She had said, "I am asking you, as a neighbor, to hold the drawdown until the court resolves the legal question." He had said, "The court cannot hold the drawdown. The Dam Safety Office has confirmed the inspection window. The maintenance schedule is a license condition. No court order can compel me to defer a mandatory license requirement without the Dam Safety Office's concurrence, and the Dam Safety Office will not concur in deferring an overdue inspection. The gates open on the scheduled date." She had been quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, the controlled quality had shifted, not to anger, but to something that was the specific sound of a person who has run out of the argument she prepared and is hearing the one she didn't prepare for. She said, "You could have come to us years ago. You could have told us about this license, about the drawdown schedule, about the agreement you needed. We would have worked with you." He had said, "Your developer had my contact information in 2004. My name is on the deed and the license and the county assessor's parcel record." A title search before the first lot sold would have found dam operating license DOL-1961-008 in the State Dam Safety Office's public records. The agreement should have been proposed before the first home was built. I waited 21 years for the HOA to find the license and contact me. Nobody did. She had said, "That's not fair." He had said, "Fair is a recorded reservoir use agreement in the county deed records saying what the relationship between my dam and your community's lake actually is. That's what I asked for in the demand letter. That's what your board voted to reject. The gates open in 30 days. If the board reconsiders before then, Clara Venn's number is in the demand letter." He had ended the call and had set the phone on the desk. He had opened the maintenance log and written the entry. "Call from Sandra Price, HOA President. Approximately 2:30 p.m. She requested drawdown deferral pending court resolution. Advised, drawdown is mandatory license condition, not subject to court-ordered deferral without Dam Safety Office concurrence. Board vote to reject demand noted. Drawdown notification period running. Gate A opens on scheduled date. Reservoir, normal pool, 34 feet. He had initialed the entry. He had gone to the dam that evening at dusk and had stood on the inspection walkway in the fading light, the reservoir running east in the long April evening, the Lakeview Shores dock structures still visible at the far end of the eastern arm. 29 days to Gate A. He had looked at the hand wheel and had thought about his father closing the gates in 1961, watching the water rise for the first time, understanding that every relationship the reservoir created between the dam and the downstream channel, between the operating pool and the surrounding land, between the licensed operator and everyone who built against the water's presence, began with the instrument that said who held the authority and what the obligations were. DOL-1961-008 said who held the authority. 21 years of no reservoir use agreement. In the maintenance log, described the obligation that hadn't been met. He walked back to his truck in the dark. 29 days. Sandra had filed the emergency injunction on a Monday, 18 days into the 30-day notification period, 12 days before Gate A was scheduled to open. Clara had called Harlan that afternoon. She had said, "Crane filed an emergency injunction application in County District Court this morning. He's arguing irreparable harm to 87 property owners, imminent financial damage to the community's property values, and intentional interference with established property rights. He's asking the court to halt the drawdown pending the resolution of the reservoir use enforcement action. Judge Orwell has the application. Same judge as our enforcement action. The case is consolidated when Crane filed the injunction in the same court. She's requested a response from both parties and from the State Dam Safety Office within 5 business days. Harlan had said, "The court asked the Dam Safety Office." Clara had said, "Standard procedure when a court action touches a licensed regulatory activity." Orwell is doing exactly what a careful judge does. She wants the agency's position before she rules on whether she has the authority to halt a state-licensed maintenance operation. Witt's office will respond. I know how they'll respond because I've read the statute and the license, and I know what the Dam Safety Office's position has been in every prior injunction attempt against a licensed drawdown in this state's history. He had said, "Has it happened before?" She had said, "Twice, 1994 and 2008. Both times a downstream or adjacent property owner sought to halt a mandatory maintenance drawdown by injunction. Both times the Dam Safety Office filed a statement asserting that the maintenance drawdown was a non-delegable license condition, and that no court order could compel or prevent compliance without the office's concurrence. Both times the injunction was denied. The 1994 case went to the state appellate court on appeal, and the denial was affirmed in a published opinion that is still good law. I've cited it in our response brief. He had said, "When does Orwell rule?" Clara had said, "She'll rule within 48 hours of receiving the Dam Safety Office's statement. If Witt's office files by Friday, we have a ruling by Monday. Gate A opens Tuesday." The Dam Safety Office had filed on Thursday. Clara had sent Harlan the filing by email that evening. 4 pages on the State Dam Safety Office's letterhead, signed by the office's district director and countersigned by the state's Dam Safety Legal Counsel. The filing's opening paragraph had been the clearest statement of the agency's position Harlan had read in 38 years of professional dam safety work. The State Dam Safety Office files this statement in response to the court's request regarding the maintenance drawdown scheduled under Dam Operating License DOL-1961-008. The office advises the court that the maintenance drawdown described in the licensed operator's notification is a mandatory operating condition of DOL-1961-008, required every 7 years under the license's Class B impoundment maintenance schedule. The licensed operator's obligation to perform this drawdown is non-delegable and non-deferrable without the office's written concurrence. The office has not concurred in any deferral of the scheduled drawdown. The office further advises the court that under the state's Dam Safety Statute, Section 47-214, no court order may compel or prevent a licensed dam operator's compliance with a mandatory license maintenance requirement without the office's written concurrence. The office respectfully submits that the court lacks the authority to grant the requested injunction. The second page had addressed the irreparable harm argument directly. The petitioner argues that the drawdown will cause irreparable harm to 87 property owners whose properties border the reservoir. The office notes that the maintenance drawdown is a recurring, scheduled, and publicly documented requirement of the license that has been performed 7 times since the license's 1962 issuance. The office further notes that the license and its maintenance schedule are public records available in the State Dam Safety Office's Public Records portal. Any property owner or lender conducting due diligence on a parcel adjacent to a licensed impoundment has access to the drawdown schedule through this public record. The office takes no position on the underlying property rights dispute, but submits that the harm alleged by the petitioner arises from the absence of a recorded reservoir use agreement, not from the licensed operator's compliance with his license conditions. Harlan had read that paragraph twice. He had said to Clara, when she called after sending the filing, "They put the reservoir use agreement in the statement." She had said, "The Dam Safety Office didn't have to say that. They said it because it's accurate and because a state agency's statement to a court carries weight that a party's brief doesn't." Orwell is going to read that paragraph and understand that the harm the HOA is experiencing is a consequence of their own title gap, not of Harlan Dodd's licensed maintenance schedule. Judge Orwell had ruled on Monday morning, 2 pages, direct, no extended analysis required when the statutory authority was as clear as Section 47-214. The injunction was denied. The court lacked the authority under the Dam Safety Statute to halt a mandatory licensed maintenance operation without the State Dam Safety Office's concurrence. The office had not concurred. The drawdown would proceed on the licensed operator's schedule. The court noted that the underlying reservoir use enforcement action remained pending and that the parties were encouraged to pursue a negotiated resolution. Clara had texted Harlan at 9:14 a.m. Injunction denied. Gate A opens tomorrow. He had gone to the dam at 6 a.m. on Tuesday. The May morning cool and clear, the North Ridge's snowpack gone, but the spring runoff still feeding Cutter Creek at above base flow volume. The reservoir at 34 feet on the staff gauge, the surface still in the early light. He had read the gauge, written it in the maintenance log, and had photographed the gate assembly, the staff gauge, and the reservoir surface from the inspection walkway. He had set the torque wrench on Gate A's hand wheel and had begun turning counterclockwise. Gate A opened by counterclockwise rotation, the reverse of the closing sequence, the gate retracting from its seat in the conduit's inlet, the flow increasing through the opening as the gate cleared. He had turned the wheel to the quarter open position, the setting that produced the calculated 6 inches per day drawdown rate at normal operating pool head, and had secured the wheel with the locking pin he used during partial open operations to prevent inadvertent gate movement. He had photographed the wheel position, the locking pin, and the conduit's downstream discharge point, where the flow was now visible as a steady stream into the downstream channel. He had noted the time, 6:22 a.m. He had written in his field notebook, May 6, 2026, Gate A opens 6:22 a.m. Position, quarter open. Calculated discharge, approximately 1,400 gallons per minute. Expected drawdown rate, 6 inches per day. Reservoir level at opening, 34.0 feet staff gauge. Gate B, closed. DOL-1961-008 maintenance drawdown, initiated per state inspection schedule. Inspector, James Witt, Western District. He had gone back each morning at 6 a.m. Day 1, staff gauge at 33.5 feet, 6 inches, consistent with calculation. Day 2, 33.0 feet, 12 inches total. Gate A discharge steady, downstream channel carrying the flow at normal capacity. Day 3, 32.5 feet. The Lakeview Shores dock structures at the northeastern arm's far end were showing their first exposed piling sections, the lowest dock boards on the most shallow gradient lots, sitting 2 to 3 inches above the water line rather than at it. Harlan had photographed the dock structures from the inspection walkway with his telephoto lens, the images showing the waterline's recession against the fixed dock geometry. Day 5, 31.7 feet, 28 inches of drawdown. The northeastern arm's shallow gradient lots had 22 to 28 inches of exposed piling visible. The boat launch ramp's concrete toe was beginning to emerge from the waterline, the ramp extending below the current water surface, but its toe's concrete edge visible in the clear water at the launch's lower end. Day 7, 30.8 feet, 38 inches. Harlan had driven the ranch track to his eastern boundary berm, the fence line that ran along the reservoir's southern margin, and had looked northeast across the water toward the Lakeview Shores development. The waterline's recession was visible from the boundary without binoculars, the pale band of exposed mudflat at the northeastern arm's margin, the dock structures sitting above the waterline on their exposed pilings, the boat launch ramp's lower section dry. He had counted the dock structures showing significant exposure, 11, 12, 14. The mudflat margins were pale and soft at the water's edge, the exposed lakebed still wet, the reservoir's retreat leaving a dark, wet tide line against the dry margin above it. Day 10, 29.0 feet, 5 feet of drawdown, 1 foot beyond the 4-foot target, the rate slightly above calculation because the spring runoff had subsided and Cutter Creek's inflow had dropped to near base flow, reducing the net reservoir level by slightly more than the pure discharge calculation. Harlan had noted the inflow reduction and had calculated the adjusted drawdown rate, approximately 6.4 inches per day at current inflow. He had called Witt to confirm the adjusted timeline for the inspection window. Witt had said, "We need 5 days at or below 30 feet. At your current rate, you'll be at 30 feet in approximately 4 days. I'll plan to arrive on day 15. The mudflat margins on the 34 northeastern lots were fully exposed by day 10. Harlan had photographed them from the boundary berm with his telephoto lens, the dock structures standing on their full piling heights, the boat launch ramp dry to its toe, the mudflat extending from the original water line 40 to 90 feet to the current water edge, depending on the lot's bottom gradient. The exposed bed was a pale gray-brown clay, cracked at the upper margins where it had dried in the May sun, still wet and dark at the lower edge, where the waterline currently sat. On 3 of the lots, the dock finger piers were entirely out of the water, the dock platforms sitting on dry mudflat, the boats that had been tied to those docks, presumably moved or resting on the exposed bed. He had photographed each of these conditions in sequence, and had filed the images by date in the Water Systems folder. The mortgage lenders had begun sending certified letters to the 34 northeastern lot owners on day 8. Clara had learned this through 2 channels simultaneously: a call from Crane's office asking whether Harlan would agree to a joint statement to the affected lenders describing the drawdown as temporary and the enforcement action as pending, and a call from a title company in the county seat whose officer had been retained by one of the lenders to conduct a title review of the affected parcels, and had found the reservoir use enforcement action in the court's active case index. Clara had declined the joint statement request. My client is not in a position to characterize the drawdown's permanence or its relationship to the enforcement action in a document addressed to lenders, and had provided the title company's officer with the case number and filing date for the enforcement action, which was already public record. The certified letters from the lenders had varied in their specific language, but had run consistent in their substance. The lender had become aware of a pending legal action and a maintenance drawdown affecting the reservoir that constituted the primary amenity basis for the property's appraised value and the loan's underwriting. The lender was requesting documentation of the recorded reservoir use agreement, establishing the property's legal right to the lake level incorporated into the original appraisal. If no such agreement existed, the lender was placing the loan in technical review, pending reassessment of the disclosed material risk. 11 lenders had sent letters to 34 property owners by day 10 of the drawdown. 6 loan files were in technical review. The mudflat was visible from the clubhouse deck. Harlan had stood at the staff gauge on the morning of day 10 and had read 29.0 feet and had written it in the maintenance log and had looked east across the reservoir. The water surface reduced, the shoreline pulled back from its normal margins, the exposed mudflat pale against the dark water of the main channel, the dock structures standing on their pilings in the clear May morning. He had been looking at this reservoir for 64 years. He had watched his father close the gates in 1961. He had read the gauge 10,000 times. He had opened the gate 6 days ago on the state's schedule, the same schedule the license had carried since 1962, and the water was doing what water did when a gate opened. It was finding the level that the gate position allowed. He had written in the maintenance log, Day 10, staff gauge 29.0 feet, total drawdown 5.0 feet, drawdown rate 6.4 inches per day at current inflow. 34 northeastern lots, mudflat margins fully exposed, 40 to 90 feet from original waterline. Dock structures, exposed pilings on all 34 lots, 3 lots dock platforms on dry bed. Mortgage lender certified letters, 11 lenders, 34 owners, 6 loans in technical review per Clara Venn. Inspector Witt arrival, day 15. Gate A, quarter open. Gate B, closed. He had initialed the entry. The state had looked at the license. The court had read section 47-214. The injunction had been denied. The gates had opened on schedule. The reservoir was at 29 feet. Witt was arriving in 5 days. The hearing was set for a Thursday in late June. Witt had completed the inspection on day 19 of the drawdown. 5 days at the 29-foot level. The upstream embankment face examined, the gate seals inspected, the spillway inlet cleared of the sediment accumulation that 20 years of normal pool operation had deposited at the Morning Glory inlet's lip. The downstream toe's seepage condition measured and found within acceptable parameters. Witt had given Harlan his preliminary findings on the inspection's final day, standing on the inspection walkway with his clipboard in the May afternoon. Embankment condition good, no piping indicators, No seepage anomalies at the toe. Gate seals showing the wear consistent with their installation age and requiring replacement within the next inspection cycle. Spillway inlet cleared and flowing normally. The formal inspection report would follow within 30 days. Harlan had noted the preliminary findings in the maintenance log and had thanked Witt, who had driven back down the ranch road without comment. The economy of a state inspector whose job was the dam's condition, not the legal disputes surrounding it. Harlan had closed Gate A the morning after Witt left. He had gone to the dam at 6 a.m., removed the locking pin from the hand wheel, and had turned the wheel clockwise. The closing sequence, the gate advancing toward its seat, the discharge through the conduit reducing rotation by rotation until the gate seated and the flow stopped and the downstream channel went quiet. He had photographed the closed position and had written the maintenance log entry. Gate A closed. Maintenance inspection complete. Reservoir level at closure, 29.1 feet. Refill commences on natural inflow from Cutter Creek. Estimated refill to normal operating pool, 4 to 6 weeks at current inflow. He had initialed the entry and had looked at the staff gauge, 29.1 feet. The reservoir beginning its slow recovery toward 34 feet on Cutter Creek's base flow. The hearing had been 6 weeks after the gate closure. Judge Orwell, the same consolidated docket. The courtroom, the same small county district room with the wood paneling and the fluorescent lights. Sandra was in the gallery with 3 board members. Crane sat at the respondent's table with a water rights consultant, whose credentials Harlan did not recognize. Clara sat at the petitioner's table with Harlan to her left, the maintenance log on the table, the license documents in the exhibit binder. Clara had presented in 40 minutes. She had opened with the license, DOL-1961-008 on the projector. The 1962 issuance, the operator transfer to Harlan in 1987, the 2012 renewal, the sole authority provision in the licensed operator section. She had read the provision aloud. No person other than the licensed operator or the licensed operator's authorized designee may adjust the gate assemblies or alter the reservoir's operating level without the licensed operator's written authorization. She had said, "This provision has been in the license since 1962. It is the foundational legal fact of this case. The reservoir's operating level is not a natural geographic condition. It is a managed condition, set and maintained by a single licensed operator under a state-issued instrument that is a public record, available to any person conducting title or regulatory due diligence on a parcel adjacent to this dam." She had moved to the maintenance log. She had placed the 2004 entry on the projector, the annotation about Lakeview Premier Development's grading, the decision to defer negotiation, the closing line, no reservoir use agreement. She had then placed the 2025 annual summary entry on the projector, the same closing line, 21 years later, no reservoir use agreement. She had said, "Every annual summary entry in this maintenance log from 2004 through 2025 ends with those 4 words. 21 years of documented, continuous, uninterrupted absence of a legal instrument. The HOA's community lake, its 87 dock structures, its boat launch, its clubhouse deck, and the $680,000 average property value that the county assessor's records attribute to lakefront premium. All of it built against a reservoir level that existed because one man kept his gates closed and had no legal obligation to continue doing so." She had placed the county assessor's blended value analysis on the projector, the lakefront premium calculation, the private lakefront access and dock infrastructure notation, the aggregate assessed value of the 87 parcels attributable to the lake. She had said, "The HOA's community is not just living on Harlan Dodd's water. It is financially valued on Harlan Dodd's water. Every mortgage underwriting, every appraisal, every property tax assessment in this development incorporates a lakefront premium calculated against a reservoir level that has no recorded legal basis." She had placed the mortgage lender certified letters, 6 representative examples from the 11 lenders who had sent notices, on the projector. She had said, "When Gate A opened and the reservoir dropped 5 feet over 19 days, 11 mortgage lenders sent certified letters to 34 property owners asking for documentation of the recorded reservoir use agreement. There is no recorded reservoir use agreement. 6 loan files are in technical review. This is not a hypothetical harm. The financial exposure that arises from the absence of a recorded instrument is being experienced right now by 34 households in this community, and it will recur at every subsequent maintenance drawdown, 2033, 2040, 2047, until a recorded instrument is in the county deed records, saying what the relationship between this dam and this community actually is. Crane had presented for 35 minutes. His argument ran the same 3 tracks his response letter had carried: implied easement, established use, irreparable harm, with the addition of a 4th argument his consultant had developed, that the dam safety statute's preemption of court authority over licensed operations did not extend to the underlying property rights dispute, and that the court retained equitable authority to recognize the HOA's established use rights independent of the license's operational provisions. The consultant had testified briefly on comparable implied water surface easement cases in adjacent states. Clara had cross-examined on each. None involved a prior appropriation state. None involved a state dam safety preemption statute. None had been followed by courts in this jurisdiction. Judge Orwell had asked one question during Crane's presentation. She had waited until he had completed the implied easement argument, had looked at the maintenance log entries Clara had left on the projector, and had said, "Mr. Crane, does the Lakeview Shores HOA hold any recorded instrument, any easement, any water right, any reservoir use agreement, any instrument of any kind, establishing their legal right to the reservoir level their properties require?" Crane had said, "Your Honor, the HOA's position is that the combination of the established use period, the development's reasonable reliance, and the implied easement doctrine," Orwell had said. I asked whether they hold a recorded instrument, yes or no. Crane had said, "No, Your Honor." Orwell had written a note. She had said, "Continue." She had issued her ruling from the bench 20 minutes after Crane concluded. She had begun with the license. DOL-1961-008 was a valid state-issued dam operating license. The licensed operator's sole authority over gate operations was unambiguous and had been confirmed by the State Dam Safety Office's statement to this court in the injunction proceeding, and the reservoir's operating level was a managed condition, subject to the licensed operator's authority, not a natural geographic feature, subject to common law riparian or implied easement doctrine. She had addressed the established use argument. 21 years of use of a managed reservoir did not create an implied easement against the licensed operator, when the licensed operator had continuously documented his reservation of rights, had performed mandatory maintenance drawdowns during the use period, and had provided advance notification of those drawdowns to the adjacent property owner. The maintenance log's 21 years of no reservoir use agreement entries were dispositive on the question of acquiescence. She had addressed the implied easement argument. An implied easement required that the use be apparent, continuous, and reasonably necessary, and that the servient estate owner knew of and acquiesced in the use. The third element failed for the same reason as the established use argument. The licensed operator's documented reservation of rights precluded a finding of acquiescence. She had then issued the order. The HOA was directed to negotiate a recorded reservoir use agreement with Harlan Dodd within 90 days of the order's date. The agreement was to be recorded in the county deed records as an easement appurtenant to the HOA's common area parcel, and was to address the reservoir's normal operating pool level, the maintenance drawdown schedule, and its effects on the affected parcels, and fair compensation to the licensed operator for 21 years of unauthorized beneficial use. If no recorded agreement was executed and filed within 90 days, the court would issue a declaratory finding that the HOA's 87 lakefront parcels lacked a documented legal right to the reservoir level incorporated into their appraised values, and that finding would be recorded in the county deed records at each of the 87 affected parcels as a title notice, a cloud on the title of every lakefront property in the development, visible to every future buyer, lender, and title company until a recorded reservoir use agreement was executed. She had said, "The court is aware that this order places significant pressure on the HOA to negotiate. The court is also aware that the instrument being ordered, a recorded reservoir use agreement, is the instrument that should have been negotiated before the first lot in this development was sold. The 90-day window is the court's recognition that 21 years of unauthorized use cannot be resolved in a day, and that a fair agreement requires good faith negotiation from both sides. The court expects both parties to approach that negotiation as the court expects, with the recognition that the recorded instrument, once executed, protects both the licensed operator's rights and the community's interests in perpetuity. She had gathered her notes. Harlan had looked at the maintenance log on the table in front of him. He had set his hand on the cover. 21 years of entries. 21 annual summaries ending with 4 words that the court order had now made the operative fact of a 90-day negotiation. Clara had said, quietly, "The title notice threat is the order's real force. 87 deed record clouds will move this faster than the compensation number." He had said, "How long before Sandra resigns?" Clara had looked at him. He had said, "The dissenting vote in the 4-1 board rejection. Same pattern as the last 2 stories." She had gathered her exhibits. She had said, "Probably before the 90-day clock reaches 60 days. He had picked up the maintenance log and had followed her out of the courtroom into the June afternoon. The hearing behind him, the negotiation ahead, the reservoir at the dam recovering toward 34 feet on Cutter Creek's steady inflow, the gates closed, the license current, the court order in the record. Sandra's resignation letter went to the community forum on a Monday, 8 days after the judgment. 1 paragraph, effective immediately, personal reasons, 5 years of service acknowledged. She did not mention the hearing. She did not mention the order. She did not mention the mud-flat margins or the mortgage lender letters or the 90-day clock or the threat of a title notice recorded at each of the 87 parcels she had spent 5 years telling residents was their community's heart. The new interim board president was a unit owner named David Carr, the one in the 4-1 vote, whose dissent the board meeting minutes had recorded without elaboration. He had called Clara's office on a Wednesday morning and had asked to speak with Harlan directly. Clara had conferred the call. He had said, "Mr. Dodd, I've been on this board for 3 years. I voted against the demand rejection in March because I read dam operating license, DOL-1961-008, the weekend after we received the demand letter, and I understood what it meant. I want to resolve this correctly. What does a fair agreement look like from your side?" Harlan had said, 3 components. A permanent recorded easement appurtenant to the HOA's common area parcel, establishing the community's right to the reservoir at normal operating pool. The instrument that should have been in the county deed records before the first lot sold in 2005. Fair compensation for 21 years of unauthorized beneficial use, calculated by Clara's water rights economist at the regional recreational impoundment rate, and a recorded maintenance cost-share agreement covering the dam's ongoing inspection and upkeep, the 7-year drawdown schedule, the inspection costs, the gate maintenance, so that the HOA's 87 households can plan around the drawdown rather than being surprised by it every 7 years. David had said, "The title notice threat. If we reach a recorded agreement within 90 days, the court doesn't issue it." Harlan had said, "Correct. The recorded agreement is the resolution. The title notice is what happens if there is no agreement." David had said, "I'll have new counsel retained by end of week. We'll be ready to negotiate." The negotiation had taken 7 weeks. Clara and the HOA's new property counsel, a water rights and title attorney named Susan Holt, retained by David the following Friday, had worked through the easement's operative provisions in 4 sessions: the normal operating pool designation, the drawdown schedule's incorporation into the easement instrument, the 34 affected lots' acknowledgement of the drawdown's effects on dock access during inspection periods, and the compensation figure. The water rights economist's calculation had come to $156,000 for 21 years of unauthorized use at the regional recreational impoundment rate. The HOA had countered at $128,000. They had settled at $144,000 in the 3rd session. The maintenance cost-share agreement had been straightforward, a 60-40 split, Harlan carrying 60 as the licensed operator, the HOA carrying 40 as the primary beneficiary of the normal operating pool, the costs covering WIT's inspection fees, the gate seal replacement due in the next cycle, and the ongoing embankment monitoring program. The HOA had wired $144,000 to Clara's trust account on the instrument's execution date. Clara had dispersed it to Harlan the same afternoon. The easement and the maintenance cost share agreement had recorded in the county deed records 4 days later, the instruments appearing in both parcel indices, Harlan's 1,100-acre parcel and the HOA's 14-acre common area parcel. The reservoir use right finally documented in the county deed records 22 years after the first lot had been graded against the water, and 65 years after his father had closed the gates and watched the basin fill. The mortgage lender's technical reviews had closed within 2 weeks of the recording. The recorded easement instrument, providing the documented legal basis the lenders had requested. The title notice threat dissolved. The 34 affected loan files cleared of their technical review flags. The 34 northeastern lot owners had each received confirmation letters from their lenders. The reservoir use right was now recorded. The maintenance drawdown schedule was documented in the easement instrument. The material risk disclosure was complete. The reservoir had returned to normal operating pool 4 weeks after Gate A had closed. Cutter Creek's base flow steady through the summer, the staff gauge climbing back through its graduated markings day by day, the water surface recovering its 340-acre extent, the dock structures on the 34 northeastern lots returning to their designed waterline positions as the pool rose, the boat launch ramp toe submerging again, the mudflat margins disappearing under the returning water. Harlan had walked the dam the morning after the agreement recorded. He had gone at 6 a.m., the July morning already warm, the North Ridge clear against the early sky, Cutter Creek audible in the upstream basin at its summer base flow. He had read the staff gauge, 34.0 feet, normal operating pool. He had looked at Gate A's handwheel in the closed position, Gate B beside it, both gates seated, the spillway running its thin overflow arc at the Morning Glory Inlet, where the reservoir had reached its designed overflow elevation and was passing the surplus to the downstream channel, the way it had passed it since his father set the spillway elevation in 1961. He had walked the embankment crest, the full 380 feet from the south abutment to the north, the earthen fill solid under his boots, the upstream face running down to the water's edge, the downstream face dry and grassed, the toe undisturbed. He had looked at the reservoir from the crest's midpoint, 340 acres of water in the morning light, the eastern arm running toward the Lakeview Shores Development's dock structures, the 87 docks at their waterline positions, the clubhouse deck visible at the common area's northeastern corner, the water moving nowhere because the gates were closed, and the spillway was passing the surplus, and the reservoir was exactly where his father had designed it to be. He had pulled the maintenance log from his jacket and had written the entry at the embankment crest in the morning light. July 14th, 2026. Staff gauge, 34.0 feet. Gate A, closed. Gate B, closed. Spillway, normal overflow. Reservoir, normal operating pool. Easement, number 2026-RU-0089. And maintenance agreement number 2026-MA-0031, recorded July 13th, 2026. County deed records, both parcel indices. Compensation paid and dispersed. Mortgage lender technical reviews. Closed. DOL-1961-008. Current. He had looked at the entry for a moment. Then he had written the final line. Agreement recorded. Gates nominal. Reservoir at operating pool. Matter. Recorded. He had initialed it and closed the log. He had stood at the embankment crest and had looked at the dam his father had built in 1961, the earthen fill, the concrete spillway, the gate assemblies in the south abutment, the staff gauge at the upstream toe showing 34 feet, the way it had shown 34 feet on 10,000 mornings. His father had understood before breaking ground that the dam's relationship to everything built against its water began with the instrument that said who held the authority. DOL-1961-008 had said it since 1962. The easement in the county deed records said the rest of it now. He went inside.